The shrill cries of hawkers echoed through the dusty streets of Benin City, mingling with the distant honks of keke napep and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith hammering in a nearby compound. At number 17 Osawe Crescent, the Igbo-Ora compound stood proudly, its freshly painted cream walls, lush mango trees, and sculpted hedges reflecting the wealth and stature of the family who lived there. Inside the large bungalow, tension brewed. Ife Igbo-Ora, barely 13, sat slouched at the dining table, surrounded by textbooks, notebooks, pencils, and a rumpled school bag that looked like it had been through war. His school uniform, still on, even though school had ended hours ago, was soaked with sweat around the armpits. His forehead was creased with anxiety, and he stared down at his math workbook as though it were written in ancient hieroglyphics. Omolara, his mother, paced the living room restlessly, occasionally casting worried glances at her son. Her wrapper was half loosened, her feet bare, her hair tied up in a scarf that showed signs of hasty wrapping. She was a woman known in the community for her composure and poise. But today, her frustration made her forget all that. Chief Igbo-Ora, a thick-chested man in his late 50s with a trimmed beard peppered in gray, leaned against the mahogany doorframe of his study, frowning at the crumpled report card in his hand. Red ink was scrawled across the page, circling Eve's failing grades in mathematics, English, and basic science. The words below average and needs urgent attention seemed to mock him with every glance. 3 terms in a row, Chief bellowed. 3. Omolara, are we feeding this boy for nothing? It's not like he isn't trying, Chief, Omolara said softly. He studies. I even stay up with him sometimes. Then what kind of child is he? All this money we pay to Graceland Academy, and see what we are getting. Ah, God, is this how my enemies will laugh at me? The air was thick with disappointment. Eve shifted in his seat but said nothing. He was used to this routine by now. Come home with bad results, watch his father's anger boil over, endure his mother's tears, and then go back to school as if nothing had happened. But something in him was breaking. He didn't understand why the words in his textbooks never stayed in his head, or why numbers refused to make sense even when he stared at them for hours. He was tired, but he was more afraid. I'll get him a tutor, Chief finally declared, turning on his heel and walking back into his study. We'll fix this nonsense, Omolara hesitated. But Chief, maybe it's not just about the books. What if he's not understanding the method his teachers are using? Or maybe he has a learning issue. We could see an education consultant. You want to waste money on one Oyinbo-sounding person to tell us what we already know? Chief snapped. He's lazy, or he's being distracted. Maybe those friends of his are teaching him useless things. A good tutor will straighten him out. Omolara sighed and sat down beside her son. She took his hand gently. Ife, are you okay? He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Mummy, I try. I really do. But when I read, it's like my brain closes. Her heart squeezed. She knew her son. He was not lazy. He was bright. When he spoke, his thoughts were deep, his imagination vivid. But something wasn't clicking when it came to academics, and she couldn't explain it. I know, my baby, we'll figure this out, she whispered. But outside the room, Chief was already making calls, and the decisions he made that night would open the door to something none of them saw coming. Not just a tutor, something darker, something older. 2 weeks passed. The Harmattan haze thickened, blanketing Benin City in a smoky chill that clung to clothes and dried-out lips. At the Igbo-Ora compound, the air of tension had mellowed, replaced with cautious anticipation. Rumor had it that Chief Igbo-Ora had found a solution to his son's academic woes, a special kind of tutor with results that speak louder than grammar. His name was Mr. Odion. He arrived on a quiet Wednesday morning, stepping out of a beat-up silver Toyota Camry with Lagos plates. His suitcase was modest, black and unbranded, and he wore a simple navy caftan with dark sandals. But there was something about him that was unsettling. His presence was powerful, not loud, not arrogant, but heavy, as if the very air shifted. When he stepped into a room, He was tall, unusually tall and slim like a carved Iroko tree. His skin was smooth and deep brown, his eyes set beneath thick brows, and always that faint half-smile playing on his lips like a secret he never intended to share. Chief welcomed him with his usual grandeur. "Mr. Odion, thank you for coming. We heard you're the best. My cousin in Lagos said you helped his son jump from 38% to first position in one term." Odion inclined his head with humble pride. The child simply needed unlocking. Every mind has a door, it just takes the right hand to open it. Omolara, seated nearby, watched him keenly. Her instincts, honed from years of navigating both motherhood and the subtle politics of being a high society wife, flared up with unease. This man had a confidence that felt unnatural, too composed, too deliberate. Odion continued. "Before we begin, there are a few conditions I must place." "Conditions?" Omolara asked. "Yes," he said, smiling calmly. "My methods are unique. I require absolute privacy with the child during sessions. No interruptions, no eavesdropping, and no questioning of my process. I also need his full schedule cleared, his evenings, weekends, and any distractions removed. I do not teach half-heartedly." Chief nodded eagerly. "Done. As long as he improves." Odion reached into his bag and produced a typed contract. Omolara frowned as she read the pages. Confidentiality? Non-interference? Even a clause that we can't terminate the sessions until you say it's complete? "It's for his benefit," Odion replied smoothly. "When you bake bread, you don't open the oven halfway. You let the fire finish its work." Omolara stared at him. "And if we want to stop?" Odion's smile deepened. "You won't." Reluctantly, they signed. Eve met his new tutor for the first time that evening. Odion entered his room at exactly 6 p.m. sharp. He didn't greet, didn't waste time. He simply asked, "Are you ready to change?" The boy nodded nervously. "Then forget everything you think you know. Your new learning begins now." The next few days were strange. Eve no longer joined his parents for dinner. He remained locked in his room with Odion for hours. The boy's laughter, his usual chatter, had quieted. When Omolara asked what they studied, Ife only said, "He teaches with my mind. He says I must open it wide to see clearly." Once, she walked past his room and thought she heard something odd. Eve reciting numbers in a language she didn't recognize. Another evening, she opened his door a crack and glimpsed Odion seated cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, chanting lowly while Ife sat still, eyes rolled upward. The next day, Ife answered a complex science question with robotic precision. Chief was thrilled. "See? I told you he just needed the right teacher," he said, laughing. But Omolara was troubled. Her son had memorized the periodic table in one day. His handwriting had changed. He no longer called her mummy, just mother, cold, flat, formal. And at night she saw him talking in his sleep, reciting formulas, smiling in his dreams. The tutor was working. But what exactly was he teaching? The dry winds continued to rattle the window panes of the Igbo-Ora compound, as if nature itself was trying to warn them. Days had turned into weeks since Mr. Odion began tutoring Ife, and though the boy's academic performance improved in astonishing leaps, something else, something darker, was brewing beneath the surface. At first, the neighbors marveled. Ife was now solving advanced math problems with ease, reciting Shakespearean soliloquies without stumbling, and even correcting adults during discussions. But then came the whispers. It began with Mama Adebayo, who sold akara by the gate. "Madam," she told Omolara in a hushed tone, eyes darting nervously to the house, "I dey hear strange things for una house. Sometimes na chanting I dey hear, sometimes na small drums, those ones way native doctors dey use. And, wetin una dey do for inside?" Omolara's face tightened. "It's just tutoring, Mama Adebayo. My son is learning well now." But even as she spoke, she remembered the incident from 2 nights ago. Around midnight, she had awoken to a strange humming sound, low and rhythmic. She crept to the corridor and saw a faint red glow seeping from beneath Ife's door. She reached for the handle, but it was ice cold, as if the door separated two worlds. The next morning, Ife had dark rings under his eyes, but he didn't mention anything. He just sipped his pap slowly and said, "Mother, do you know that if you open your inner eye, you can count numbers and colors?" Omolara had dropped her spoon. That week, Mama Ise, the elderly herbalist who lived 2 compounds away, came visiting uninvited. She was a bent old woman with tribal marks etched into her leathery cheeks, and a reputation for seeing things others couldn't. She sat in their parlor unbothered by Chief's lack of welcome, and sniffed the air around the house like a dog following an invisible trail. "Something is not right here," she muttered. Omolara leaned in, her heart thudding. "Mama Esse, what do you mean?" "There is a presence in this house, a shadow that moves where it should not. Something ancient, something hungry. That man, your so-called tutor, is not who he says he is." Chief scoffed. "Old woman, a beg, don't come here with your village superstitions. The man is a graduate from the University of Lagos." Mama Essie's eyes twinkled. "Is that what he told you?" He has the scent of Aja Agbara on him, the ones who call spirits to teach. But the spirits never teach for free." Omolara's blood ran cold. "What are they taking?" she whispered. "Destiny," Mama Isi replied. "His gift is not knowledge, it's exchange. Your son is not just learning. He's offering something. If you wait too long, there'll be nothing left of him but books. And numbers. His spirit will be replaced." That night, Omolara didn't sleep. She sat by the kitchen window, listening. At exactly midnight, the now familiar humming began again. Heart-pounding, she crept down the corridor and stood before Ife's door. She heard Odian's voice, low, resonant, speaking a dialect she had never heard before. The boy's voice followed, repeating after him in perfect mimicry. Omolara's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, but before she could turn it, Odian's voice rang out sharply. "Do not interrupt this process. He is almost ready." The glow from under the door pulsed once, twice, then faded. The next morning, Ife smiled at her sweetly. "Mother, I had the most beautiful dream. I was flying through numbers. They were alive. They sang to me." Omolara held back tears. Her son's eyes were changing. They had always been warm with a childlike sparkle. Now they looked endless, like staring into a well with no bottom. She turned to Chief that morning and said, "I'm watching tonight. I need to see for myself what is going on during these sessions." But Chief dismissed her. "Please, Omolara, let the man do his job. For once, our son is performing excellently. The boy even solved my business ledger errors yesterday. Let's not spoil progress with suspicion." Omolara said nothing, but her mind was made up. That night, as the clock struck 12, she hid behind the curtain in the corridor, wrapped in a shawl, silent as a shadow. And what she witnessed would haunt her forever. Midnight. The compound was silent, save for the far-off hoot of an owl perched in the mango tree and the occasional creak of the old ceiling fan spinning lazily in the hallway. Omolara crouched behind the heavy brocade curtain by Ife's door, clutching her rosary with one hand and pressing her ear to the wall. She had made up her mind. She had prayed, anointed the doorpost with oil, and whispered Psalm 91 under her breath 3 times. Whatever was going on in that room, she would face it. Tonight she had to know what had become of her son, and what Odian was truly doing to him. And then at 12:07 a.m., precisely, it began. The room's atmosphere changed. A low hum echoed, at first like a vibration inside the walls, then growing, louder, as though the very bricks of the house had begun to chant. The red light returned, leaking from under the door and casting eerie shadows on the white tiles. Omolara held her breath as a soft murmur rose, words spoken in a strange tongue, deep and rhythmic. Then came a scratching sound like chalk dragging on a slate, but sharper, metallic. Her fingers tightened around the rosary. She stood up quietly, pressed her palm against the door, and peeked through the narrow slit between it and the frame. What she saw made her knees nearly buckle. Eve was sitting cross-legged in the center of the room, shirtless, eyes closed, with strange symbols drawn across his chest in what looked like chalk or ash. His lips moved silently as he repeated words Odion chanted from behind him. The tutor stood tall, holding an ancient-looking staff with a red stone at the top. Behind him, drawn across the wall in red and black, was an enormous circular sigil, symbols of geometry and language glowing faintly. And then, something moved inside the circle. Not human. Not fully formed. A shifting, slithering presence that coiled in the air like smoke but with eyes. Eyes that blinked and glowed with gold fire. Omolara gasped. Odion suddenly stopped chanting, his head tilted sharply toward the door. "Mrs. Igbo-Ora," he said without turning. "It is unwise to interfere. The ritual is delicate." Omolara stumbled backward. "Ritual? What are you doing to my son?" Odion turned now slowly, his eyes completely black. "I'm unlocking him. You asked for results. This is the price." "Price? What price? This isn't tutoring, it's witchcraft. It is ancient teaching, Mother. Older than your churches, older than your schools. I am teaching him to remember what your kind has forgotten. I want you out. Now." Odion smiled faintly. "But the boy does not want me to leave. Ask him." Omolara turned toward her son, pleading, "Ife, please, come here, let's go." But Ife didn't look at her. He opened his eyes, and in them was a swirling sea of numbers, stars, and something else. "I'm learning, Mother," he said. "I can hear them now. They're showing me everything." "You're not well," she whispered. Odion stepped forward. "He's more than well. He's becoming." Omolara grabbed her son's hand and tried to pull him to his feet. He stood but slowly, mechanical, as if something else guided his limbs. She turned and stormed toward Chief's room, dragging Eve with her, bursting in with trembling hands. "Chief, wake up! That man is not a tutor. He's a demon. He's conjuring things." Chief sat up groggily. "Wetin day happen?" "I saw it with my own eyes. Eve is being used for something. That man must leave this house." Eve just stood there, smiling serenely. "He is helping me see." Chief rubbed his face. "Omolara, I don't know what you drank this night, but this drama is too much. The boy is doing well for once, and you're shouting demon. Haba!" Omolara slapped her palm against her chest. "God in heaven, open this man's eyes." But, even as she wept and pleaded, Eve slowly turned and walked back to his room, on his own. He didn't look back. The door closed with a quiet finality. Odion didn't come out, and the red glow under the door remained until dawn. That Sunday, Omolara took Eve to their pastor, Pastor Felix, at Light of Mercy Parish. She hoped to find clarity, to get prayers, maybe even deliverance, but Ife barely reacted as the man prayed. He just smiled politely and said, "Pastor, you're using an outdated doctrine. There are higher truths now." Pastor Felix stopped mid-prayer, stunned. "Madam, something is wrong with your boy," he said softly. "You must be careful. Very careful." Back home, Omolara told Chief again, "This is beyond books. We have to stop this." But Chief, ever proud, was blind with ambition. "If that man can make our son into a genius, let him finish the job. I don't care if he calls the spirits of Newton himself." Omolara stared at him, stunned. "You'll regret this, Chief," she whispered. "This thing you've let into our home won't just take our son. It will take everything." But by then, the red mark had already begun to form on the back of Ife's neck, a symbol neither of them had noticed, a symbol that pulsed, a warning. The days blurred together like rain on glass. Omolara could no longer tell where tutoring ended and possession began. Every night she slept lightly, fearing what she might wake to. And every morning, Ife emerged from his room quieter, smarter, and more distant. He no longer watched cartoons. He no longer played with his cousins. He no longer laughed. Instead, he spent his time scribbling equations on the walls with charcoal, building strange shapes from matchsticks and string, and talking softly to himself in symbols, not words. When Omolara asked who he was talking to, he replied, "My other teachers." The red mark on his neck had grown. At first it looked like a burn, then it began to take form, a spiral with lines through it, almost like a third eye. Whenever she tried to touch it, Ife would recoil, hissing like someone branded with fire. "Don't," he said once. "It's part of me now." Omolara tried everything. She prayed. She fasted. She called 3 pastors. One refused to step inside the house after just 10 minutes of prayer, muttering something about a binding force stronger than any he had faced before. Another tried anointing oil on the boy, only for the oil to sizzle on his skin like it was poured on hot coal. Only the last one, a soft-spoken prophet from Oyo, was brave enough to speak the truth. "Madam," he said after laying hands on Ife and trembling, "this child has been initiated into a knowledge far older than our gospel. This is not ordinary witchcraft or marine spirit. The man teaching him, he is a custodian of forgotten gates. Not all knowledge is holy." Omolara sobbed. "How do I stop it?" The prophet shook his head slowly. "You cannot. The door has been opened, and only the one who opened it can close it." That night, Omolara stormed into Ife's room. She found Odion sitting on the floor in his usual position, calm as a monk, while Ife drew complex patterns on the wall. The boy didn't flinch when she entered. He didn't even acknowledge her. "You will leave this house tonight," she snapped at Odion. "I don't care what Chief says. I'll burn this place down before I watch you destroy my son." Odion turned his head slowly. "Destroy him? Is that what you think I'm doing? You've made him into a stranger. He speaks in riddles, sees things that aren't there. He doesn't sleep, doesn't eat properly, and there's a demonic mark growing on his neck."
Odion's voice remained calm. "That is the seal of thought, a symbol of unlocking. You're witnessing the rise of a higher mind. You should be proud. I want my son back, not some vessel for ancient spirits." Eve turned at last, looking
at her with eyes that were now a deep gray like old ash. "Mother, you're afraid. But fear is the language of the unawakened." Tears welled in Omolara's eyes. "Ife, please. Remember who you are. Remember how we used to sing in the car on the way to school. Remember your Spider-Man pajamas, your toy robot?" Ife blinked. His lips trembled slightly. Then he looked down at his hands, confused. "Spider? Man?" he whispered. Odion stood up. "That is the last time you'll interrupt this process," he said coldly. "Next time, the consequence will be irreversible." Omolara stepped back. "Are you threatening me?" "No," he said, his eyes flickering black again. "I am warning you. Knowledge is jealous. Once it claims a vessel, it defends it." That week, the strange events escalated. Eve's school called. The teachers were alarmed. The boy had corrected the physics teacher mid-lecture, rewritten a whole chapter in his biology textbook with updated formulas, and told a classmate during break, "You will break your arm tomorrow at exactly 2:47 p.m. The boy broke his arm at 2:47 the next day. He started sleepwalking, scribbling on the compound's walls, symbols no one could interpret. He no longer responded to his name unless it was spoken in a specific tone, a frequency Odion had taught. Neighbors began crossing the street when they passed the Igbo-Ora gate. Children whispered that the boy inside had stars in his head. One even claimed they saw Ife floating an inch above the ground during midnight prayers, and then came the dreams. Omolara began waking up drenched in sweat after visions of Ife standing on a mountain of books, speaking in tongues to a sky full of eyes. Sometimes she heard a voice in her dream say, "He is becoming more than human. He is becoming the mind." She confronted Chief one last time. "This is the last chance," she said, her voice raw. "If you don't send that man away, I will." Chief looked tired. He had dark shadows under his eyes as though something had begun feeding on his spirit too. But pride still held him. If I send that man away, what happens if Ify goes back to being a failure? Omolara stepped closer. What happens if we lose him completely? That night she packed a bag. She had made up her mind. She would run away with her son, take him far from Odion, from Benin, from Nigeria if necessary. She didn't know if it would work, but she couldn't stay another day watching her son slip away. But when she entered Ify's room to wake him, he was gone. The window was open, the bed was empty, the walls were covered in symbols, and at the center of the room, drawn in chalk and blood, was a large eye with a single phrase beneath it. The ascension has begun. The house was in chaos. Omolara's scream echoed through the compound, waking the neighbors and sending chickens scurrying. She tore through If's wardrobe, flinging open drawers and calling his name again and again. If, my son. Somebody help me, he's gone. Odion has taken him. Chief staggered out of the bedroom in boxers, eyes heavy with sleep and confusion. What is this noise? He's gone, Chief. Our son is missing, she cried, shoving the chalk-inscribed door open wider. The sight stunned Chief into silence. If's room was no longer a room. It had become a shrine of symbols. Every inch of the wall had been scribbled on in a mixture of charcoal, red ink, and, she feared, blood. Strings hung from the ceiling in intricate geometric patterns. The floor still glowed faintly with the chalk-drawn eye, and above it, written with eerie precision, was that haunting phrase. Chief staggered back, whispering, "Jesu, what is all this?" "He's been taken. Odion did something. He's not. In the house, he's not outside, he's nowhere." Omolara shouted, tears blinding her. Neighbors began to gather at the gate, drawn by the commotion. Mama Agbon pushed through with her wrapper tied hurriedly, clucking her tongue. "I talk am. I say what nona they do with that manny no clear. Una carry foreign demon enter compound." Chief tried to call Odion's number, but it rang twice and went silent. That was when Mama Ise, the elderly seer, arrived again, this time with urgency in her steps and beads in her hands. "I saw it," she whispered, entering the room uninvited. "In my dream last night I saw a child walking through the forest of mirrors guided by a spirit in black." Omolara fell to her knees. "Where is he, Mama? Please. Where is my son?" Mama Ise sat slowly on the floor, placing her hand on the chalky eye. She closed her eyes and began to hum, a tune that sounded like mourning and warning wrapped in one. When she opened them again, they had turned milky white. "He is not gone. Not yet. But he is in the in-between, a place between spirit and flesh. The man, Odion, is an initiator. He has opened a gate of mental transfiguration, very old magic. Forbidden." Chief raised his voice. "Explain in plain English." Mama Ese looked at him. "Your son is being transformed into a vessel of eternal intellect. The process is called ascension. Once complete, he will no longer be human. He will become an embodiment of thought itself." Chief stumbled backward. "You mean our son won't remember us?" "No. He will remember everything, and nothing. He will be like a god who once knew how to love." Omolara clutched her chest. "How do we stop it?" "The window is closing fast," Mama Ise said gravely. "Tonight is the final rite. If you wish to save him, you must go to the place of convergence, where Odion began his journey. There, you will find the altar that binds the boy." "And where is that?" Omolara asked desperately. Mama Ise turned to the wall and pointed to one of the symbols, an ancient one shaped like a coiled snake with wings. "I recognize this," she murmured. "It's the mark of Igbo-Ora Hill, a sacred place outside the city. That is where Odion was born into this craft. That is where your son is now." Without wasting a moment, Omolara grabbed her keys. "I'm going." Chief tried to stop her. "We can call the police." "Will the police enter a spiritual realm?" she snapped. Mama Ise nodded. "You must go with someone of clean heart, and carry this." She handed Omolara a small calabash containing chalk from the oracle's pit, soaked in bitter leaf and ash. "Mark his forehead with this. Before the final word is spoken, it will block the spirit's completion. Omalara jumped into the car with Mama Isi by her side, the road stretching ahead like a ribbon into darkness. The drive to Igbo-Ora Hill took over an hour. The road was narrow, flanked by thick bush and silence. As they climbed the final stretch, the air changed, became denser, electric. At the summit, they saw it. A circle of fire marked the clearing. Inside it stood Odion, dressed in a flowing black robe, holding the red-stoned staff. Around him, floating mid-air, was Ife, his body suspended like a marionette, his limbs limp, eyes glowing like embers. Omalara screamed, "Ife!" Odion turned slowly, his face expressionless. "You came. Give me back my son. He is no longer yours. He belongs to the archive now. He will be the first human to reach total thought." Mama Isi stepped forward, chanting under her, breath drawing sigils in the dust with her finger. Odion raised his hand. A pulse of energy knocked them back. "Do not interfere. You cannot stop what has already begun." Omalara crawled forward, bruised and weeping. "If, baby, come back to me." And then, miraculously, If blinked. He looked down at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Mummy?" Omalara seized the moment. She pulled the calabash open, dipped her fingers into the thick, bitter chalk and reached up, smearing it across his forehead just as Odion began chanting the final incantation. The moment the chalk touched his skin, a scream, not human, ripped through the air. The circle of fire vanished. Odion stumbled backward, his staff splintering in his hands. Eve collapsed to the ground. Omalara crawled to her son and cradled him, rocking him like a baby. I've got you, my child." Odion, panting, looked at them with a mixture of rage and awe. "You don't understand what you've done. You have stolen potential from eternity." Mama Ise rose slowly, walking toward him. "And you have stolen too many children. Tonight, the chain ends." She flung a gourd at him, it shattered at his feet and a blinding light enveloped him. When it cleared, Odion was gone. Just gone. Silence returned to the hill. Omalara held her son tightly, tears soaking into his skin. He stirred, blinking up. "At her, is it morning?" he whispered. She laughed and sobbed. "Yes, my love, it is." But deep in the shadows of the hill, something watched. The ascension had been interrupted, but not erased. It had been 3 months since the night on Igbo-Ora Hill. Omalara stood on the back porch of the Igbo-Ora house, watching Eve water the garden slowly, carefully, like a boy who'd returned from war and was still unsure if peace was real. He was different now, not broken but altered. He no longer spoke in tongues or drew symbols on the wall. The red mark on his neck had faded into a pale scar, like an old birthmark with a story no one dared speak. His eyes, no longer glowing, still held a depth that sometimes frightened her. But he laughed again. He asked for jollof rice. He danced when her phone rang with a Fuji ringtone. He was home, but the house was not the same. Chief had aged overnight. He rarely left his study, and when he did, he walked as if something heavy followed behind him. He never spoke of Odion again, never defended what had happened. He couldn't. The shame of nearly offering his son to ancient spirits in exchange for academic glory had hollowed him. The Igbo-Oras had become a lesson whispered about in corners of Benin. "Be careful the tutors you invite into your home," neighbors warned. "Some don't just teach, they collect." One quiet morning, Mama Ise returned. She brought gifts, cowries, cola nuts, and a small carved statue of Eshu, the trickster, to protect the threshold. Omalara offered her a seat on the veranda and they sat, sipping palm wine in silence for a long while before Omalara finally spoke. "Do you think he's free now?" Mama Ise didn't answer at first. She watched Ife as he moved from the hibiscus bush to the mango tree, pouring water with precision. Then she said, "Free? No, but safe? For now?" Omalara's hand tightened on her glass. "I still hear whispers sometimes. In the night. And Ife, sometimes when he sleeps, he speaks in numbers again. Not words, just numbers. Mama Ise nodded. The mind is not a chalkboard, my dear. You can wipe the surface, but the marks remain beneath. Once opened, the mind cannot be closed again. Omolara swallowed hard. So what do I do? You mother him. Fiercely, softly, relentlessly. He must know that love is louder than knowledge, that the heart can anchor what the brain cannot contain. She stood, placed the Ishu statue near the front door and tied a red thread around the gate. And never again allow anyone to teach your child unless you know the teacher's origin. Not degree, not grammar, but origin. Omolara nodded. She understood now. The danger hadn't been in tutoring. It had been in blind trust, in chasing performance at any cost, in opening her door to someone whose soul was already pledged to something that devoured. That night, Ife had a nightmare. Omolara ran to his room and found him trembling, whispering under his breath. He's still watching from behind the mirror. She cradled him, rocking back and forth, singing the same lullaby she had sung when he was a baby. The Yoruba words tumbled softly from her mouth like protection spells. Omomi sunre alafia wa, oloran wanila yi. My child, sleep well, peace is here, God dwells in this home. Eventually he drifted off. She remained awake the rest of the night. The following week, Omolara was invited to a PTA meeting at Ife's new school, a local public primary school, not prestigious, not fancy, but real. The teachers were warm, the classrooms dusty, but alive with learning. When Ife was called up to read a poem, he did so in perfect cadence, no riddles, no floating, no tongues. Just a boy with a voice. The room applauded. Omolara wept quietly at the back. Later, one of the mothers sidled up to her. You know, I've been looking for a private tutor for my own son. The ones in town are too expensive. You must have used someone really good with Efe. He's so articulate. Omolara smiled thinly. Then she said calmly but firmly, Don't hire a private tutor until you know exactly who you're letting into your child's soul. The woman blinked, confused. I beg your pardon? Omolara gently took her son's hand, and they walked away together, the red sun setting behind them like a final curtain on a horror that almost consumed them all. But Ife turned to look, one last time, just briefly at the glass of a nearby window, and for a flicker of a second, the reflection smiled back without moving.